Welcome to Co-Branded, your go-to source for brand strategy, design, and business insights.
Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, we're here to help you build your brand with confidence.
Let's dive in.
Hi, Josh.
Hey.
Hey.
So today we're going to chat a little bit about perfectionism and procrastination, things that really everybody I know deals with, specifically us. We've had some conversations about procrastination or trying to make things too perfect as a creative or a designer. And sometimes we fall into those traps of second guessing ourselves and not being sure if what we're doing is right or good enough or worthy. And sometimes we just have to get over that, move forward. But easier said than done. But I do think there are some aspects that we can chat about for the business owner as well as other creative professionals. And we kind of just unpack a little bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's do it.
So perfectionism, let's start there. It's perfection and procrastination, at least the way I look at it, are kind of two sides of the same coin. Perfectionism for me is really about trying to polish something to the best possible outcome that we can expect it to have. But in reality, what's perfect? Nothing's perfect. I think you told me earlier that, there's always another solution for a problem. So trying to perfect one thing really is almost not feasible because there's just other ways to do it. So why would this one way be perfect?
I agree.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Mic drop. You got it. Yeah, especially in design. It's so interesting because we do have to understand that the design is supposed to solve a problem. There's always going to be more than one solution. And we have to understand that the moment we get to the good enough and it does what it needs to do and it provides the quality of work that you're known for, that's it. Mm-hmm. And you ship. Yeah. I know it's easy to say, especially for designers and what we're talking about, not the strategic part of design, but the visual part of design. We love to polish all the details and it's time consuming. But the worst thing is when we spend so much time polishing these details and then it turns out that they don't even matter. It's a balance. And I think we have to find a way to ship like the minimum lovable product and then see if it works and then make adjustments based on that. Having an idea, a business idea, and not being able to ship it because we're still waiting for that perfect solution. But if you don't validate your idea and then invest strategy and branding and want that branding to be perfect, and then it turns out that the product sometimes or service is not that great or it's just not validated. And I think I don't know if we talked about it in the previous episode, but a lot of founders try to start companies because they're solving their own problem. And they assume that if they have this problem, other people have the same problem. And it turns out that that's not necessarily the case. Yeah. So that's why they have to do research and figure out if it's viable.
Yeah. And to the idea of perfectionism and procrastination, just put the idea out there. I have definitely been involved with organizations where the business started from an idea of, we're solving our own problem, whether that's a project management system or whether it's a consumer product. There are likely other people that are having your problem, but it is a big enough audience to create a business from. So not trying to perfect it because you inherently know that this is going to be a business or this is the right idea. Build something, put some thought into it, but get it out there, validate it, the product market fit, and then start turning those wheels, refining a lot of the process, building the strategy behind it. But yeah, perfectionism can have that two-sided effect. One where you are scared to put it out because of the repercussions or the, again, the I'm not good enough, it's not good enough kind of mindset. So if I just did this one extra thing, or if I just made this one button better, or if I added this one feature and it's going to solve all these problems, it's a bad loop to be in because you might be solving a problem that nobody cares about and you want to get out of that habit and push forward because perfectionism really gets in the way of progress. You don't want to build something in the dark that you think is amazing and then you find out that nobody cares about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because when you're talking, I have all these points that I want to make, and hopefully I won't forget all of them. So going backwards, one thing that you said that the work is not good enough or you're not good enough. And especially for creatives, oftentimes we do put our self-worth into our work. And it's understandable because A, we're sensitive. That's why we're in creative space. B, we are oftentimes, not always, but we are kind of people pleasers. And we want the client to be happy. We want people to recommend us to other people. We want to be successful. We want to make sure that we deliver. So what I see a lot in that, I had to work really hard to separate myself from my work and really understand. And it didn't happen until like maybe 8 years in the career of being a designer that I understood that when a creative director is talking about the work, they're talking about the work. They're not talking about me. And it's very difficult to separate these two things, but it is important. And one thing is, someone said that we're so afraid that we're going to get discovered, meaning like people will figure out who we really are, but the world already knows who we are and the world already accepts us, and we don't have to try. And it's like it's a life-changing thing to understand that with your weirdness or with your introversion, whatever it is, right? You're good enough to share yourself with the world. You don't have to try to be someone who you're not, which I also see in branding and brand identity when founders think that they should, or their brand should be perceived in a certain way. But then, especially if it's a personal brand, it's very difficult for them to put the energy because it's like putting a mask on and constantly trying to be someone that you're not. And it's just exhausting, right? It takes a lot of energy.
As creatives and really individuals, people, humans, we're our own worst critic. We see ourselves in a way that maybe nobody else does because we know our insecurities, our flaws, and things like that. Perfectionism and procrastination can also come from that state of fear or unknown or, worth kind of thing. And again, we're getting deep into the psychological aspects of it, but it's important because realistically, if you didn't have fear, you just put out anything. Like you don't care. You just do it and see how it works and then change it. So, both instances really do come from that state of fear or unknown. We have to focus on some of the details and make sure that what the story you're trying to tell, the brand you're trying to present, the product you're trying to offer does what it does what you say it's going to do, but it doesn't have to be perfect, quote unquote, from day one.
Well, I mean, and again, I don't want to get too deep into this like psychological aspect of it, but I think it's important because we try to do something that is very difficult for us. And it's almost as if we needed permission. And it's almost as if we can't give ourselves that permission. It's that permission has to come from the outside world. And I don't know why, but that's just the way it is oftentimes. So sometimes it's really a matter of asking your friend, your colleague, or your family member, and they say, yes, you can suck. I give you permission to suck. And you're like, okay, I'll take it. I'll run with it. And it's not a logical thing, right? Like it's not rational, but we don't give ourselves the permission to learn. We don't give ourselves the permission to suck. And that's why, and I see this in myself too. That's also one of the reasons why it's difficult for me to start something new where I know it's going to take me months or even years to learn how to do it well, because that means that I'm going to suck for quite some time. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it. And I actually envy people who can say like, oh, I'm just going to learn how to play the piano. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, you're going to suck for so long.
But who cares? Are you going to judge that person because they're not good at piano?
No,
exactly.
But this is the thing. Like you said, you are your own worst critic because I will have so much more compassion for other people and say, it's okay, you're doing great. You're just learning. And I'm not going to have the same compassion towards myself.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have to learn because we are putting ourselves in a cage and it's hard to live that way. And life is short. Life is really short.
Go do it. We were chatting earlier about, it's like, but just go do it. But I'm scared. But just go do it scared.
Yeah.
Who cares? Go. Just do it. Yeah. So this applies to both creatives and business owners. A lot of you wrap your own personal worth and self-identity into the projects that you create, especially as a business owner. It's like, this is my baby. I've built this from the ground up, or I've spent years trying to make this a thing. And you do have to kind of separate yourself from, because you can always just tweak it. It's like, oh, that didn't work, but I'm going to do this instead. I definitely want to get on kind of some procrastination side of things, but from a perfection kind of idea, not everybody, a lot of people think that failure is a bad word. And that's why it has to be perfect. You have to get this thing where it's not going to fail. I completely and utterly disagree with that. Failure is not a bad word. It means that you're trying something. It doesn't have to be this end-all thing. It's, I did this and it didn't work. Okay, cool. Now I know to not do it that way. Because realistically, you're just learning, you're growing, you're finding out ways of not to do something, and you can just move forward and do something better.
Yes, and I like the idea of it, but I also think that it depends on the environment.
Okay.
And I'm
So like a high stakes environment, failure is worse?
Yeah, I've been in a corporate environment.
Sure.
That's how I learned that I completely do not belong in any corporate environment whatsoever. It's painful for both sides. But there is a very strong idea of success and failure, and it makes you so afraid to fail. And that's when you start being a procrastinator. That's when you start being a perfectionist. Maybe this is more for designers than it is for anyone else, but it's the environment that needs to foster the understanding that it's okay to try out different things.
I think that's a really good point, because depending on what your role is in your organization, you may not have the opportunity to fail. You may have to kind of tone that down. As a business owner, as an entrepreneur,
you will fail every day.
All the time. I think I just shared something recently with my personal network was, I'm not lucky. I've failed more times than you've tried. And I really resonate with that, because let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and who cares? I'll do something else. Like, I try to instill that in my children. I always tell my son, practice makes better, not practice makes perfect, because perfect doesn't exist. And failure is not a big deal. Circumstantially, depending on what situation you're in.
Sure.
Of course, if you're flying a plane, you don't want to fail, things like that. But generally, if you're building a tech startup, go fail a couple times, figure it out, move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it was just me. I'm assuming not. But when I first started my own thing, and I've been being self-employed and having my own studio, I always felt like I just need that particular checklist, or I just need that particular class, or I just need it, right? Like a roadmap.
And I set yourself up.
Yes, for success. And then I know that if I do this, then this and this and this, it doesn't work. Like, there's no such a thing. You have to figure it out for yourself, because the reality of it is that, and you will learn this, every single one is different. And marketing strategies that work for you might not work for me. I know people who are designers who are extremely successful. Hi, Jessica. But they are very introverted. They don't necessarily want to go out there and do public speaking gigs, right? And I really wouldn't mind. But what will work for her will not work for me, and the other way around. And we have to learn that it's not the same for everyone, and it does have to be tailored towards that person.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked a lot about the idea of perfectionism and how it applies and what we're doing, but I do want to talk a little bit about procrastination, because I think everybody deals with it to some level. We even had some of procrastination in terms of, and I don't know, maybe it was a little bit more of the perfectionism on our part with this podcast, but we talked about, early on, it's like, cool, we need to get 4 cameras, and we're going to have 2 setups, and we need this perfect audio. And we got to the point where it's like, why we're spinning our wheels. And we're never going to get launched. We're never going to validate if people even want to listen to us talk, because we are focused on all these details, which I still think we want to do. But there's no reason that you can't do something and iterate it over time, make it better as you go, versus trying to make it perfect from the very first episode.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that was me. And the reality of it is that we would not be doing this if it wasn't for you. Because you were the one to say, okay, let's just move forward. Let's see what happens. I was like, no, wait a minute. We have to do all these classes. And I would send you like all these classes on how to do a podcast and how to record and we have to have all the equipment, and we have to all the perfect studio and all this. But we, as you said, we are refining. We are watching what we're doing, and we're thinking, okay, what can we do better? This didn't work. That didn't work. And we're moving on. And that's just life, especially, again, life is short. Things happen fast, and you just have to be able to move with the same speed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Earlier in our conversation, we talked about the idea of fear. And I do think fear plays its part in perfectionism, because you're trying to put out this image or this product or this persona of perfection or polishedness. Designers specifically will polish details that aren't going to move the needle.
Yeah, to the point of pain.
And, we may notice as fellow creatives, but the idea is that you're working on something that really isn't going to move forward the business objectives. It's just little nuances that are important, but not as important as punching moving forward. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is I do strongly believe in the quality of details, and that if you can create a brand or a product that has really refined details throughout, that does have a subconscious impact on the visitor, the user, the audience, but you have to balance that. There has to be a limit to how much time you're spending on this versus moving forward, working on something more important.
Yeah, I think there's a specific time in the like project cycle when it's time for the little details. Because like the main idea, the general gist of the brand is already established and we know that it's going to work. One thing I do want to say is both business owners and creative teams that have strategists and marketing people and designers should have conversations with each other, because I see from experience a lot of designers work in a silo, and that's one of the reasons why they're polishing the pixels to perfection, because that's all they do. They design, but they don't understand, and it's not their fault because they're not let in on the strategic portion of the brand. You would actually get a lot more involvement if you let them know this is the goal, this is what we have done, this is what we're trying, all these things, that the design is supporting all these goals. But oftentimes designers are just put in the situation where they're like, okay, design this flyer. I don't know if the flyer is the best solution for this, but you won't even let me try to brainstorm with you because you already assume that that's what we need and I just have to knock it out, right? So that's why I will control the things that I can control, which is the pixel perfection. So designers are smart people. We really are. And design is not just the visual side of things, because ultimately design is communication. But we have to know what kind of things we need to communicate and who we're talking to.
Yeah, I don't even think I can add on to that. I'll simply say I agree with you. And one of the things we try to do at Loftyword is everything we do is from a strategic standpoint. There's a lot of times where we'll have a prospect or a client say, hey, we want to build this website. Well, what do you need the website for? What are you trying to accomplish with it? Again, everybody needs a website, but you hit it right on the head in terms of the designer that's working on a project. Understanding the business objective behind what you're doing is incredibly important. One, to brainstorm the right solution, but also to know that your work is impacting that bottom line versus just, well, I just made this pretty flyer, but I don't know what it did.
Yeah.
So you need to understand those things, of course.
Well, yeah. And the worst thing is that you're spending so much time designing something that you don't even know what it's going to do. You don't even know if it's going to work. And again, we're very capable and we want to be engaged. I have never seen a designer who does not want to be engaged in the project. And like, again, I think it's in our nature to want to give ourselves, share ourselves through the work. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So let's chat about procrastination. Because we've been procrastinating about procrastination. So, we talked about the idea of fear, and I think fear leads a little bit more into procrastination because you're scared to start or there's something holding you back and you don't want to do it. You had an interesting way to get started. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that in terms of when you're procrastinating, how do you even break through that?
Yes. Well, so first of all, I think we do need to understand that on one hand, procrastination is not rational, but on the other hand, it is. And I always thought that, I don't know, I'm procrastinating because there's something wrong with me, right? Or maybe there's a chemical imbalance, or maybe I'm lazy, or maybe whatever it is. But the reality of it is that, sure, maybe that is a contributing factor, but the procrastination is there for a reason. There's something that you can feel or that or that you're expecting that makes you hesitate. And that's just the way it is. It's funny because I see you like being so involved in the podcast and doing all the things. And I noticed myself that several times I procrastinated. I was going to, like, for example, put the style guide together or put some social media assets together, and I procrastinated. And I didn't know why, because I know how to do this. This is something that we both enjoy. It's supposed to benefit a lot of people and us too. Why wouldn't I want to do it? And I sat down with it and got to the conclusion that I'm scared of being known. I'm afraid that this will actually work. I'm afraid that it will take off, and that comes with some sort of a responsibility. But we're afraid of failures. We're also afraid of success. And that's just the human nature, because it's different. We don't know what that will mean in terms of our responsibilities. It's a change, and change is always scary. But so that's one thing. I think we should honor our fears and understand that they're trying to protect us from something, whether they're rational or not.
Yeah.
And lastly, it is true the vast majority of times when people procrastinate is not because they don't want to do the thing, it's because they don't want to start. And it's the start that is the most difficult thing. And that makes perfect sense because there's momentum and there's inertia. And it's the same idea of people who have like packed schedules and they're constantly on the move. And it's so easy for them to just add one thing or meet another person. It's like, that's fine. Because they have that momentum. And people who, I look at people and I think, my gosh, like, I have almost nothing on my calendar. Then I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
But that's inertia. We talked about eat the frog. That's the first thing that some people do. And there's this theory that you should do the most important and the hardest thing first. And I would never be able to do it that way. I have to have some sort of a small task to get that momentum. And it can be ridiculously easy. Send that email or delete that email, unsubscribe from something, make coffee, whatever it is. And it has to be simple enough and easy enough for me not to have resistance. And when I do that, I'm like, okay, cool, it's happening.
You're creating your own momentum.
And sometimes, and I've talked to other designers about it, sometimes it gets to like a ridiculous point of open a document, right? Or move that to a folder. And when I do that, like, I don't even notice the fact that I'm already like halfway through. So oftentimes it's just the start.
And I find that incredibly interesting and awesome. I'm probably opposite of that to where it's usually I can just start moving, but am I moving on the things that are going to impact what I'm trying to work on? A lot of times it's not. There's this concept called the swirl. As a business owner or as, in an organization, you're focused on all these things because there's so much going on and, I have to do this, I have to do this, do this. So you start doing the little things because it makes you feel good. Like you're actually accomplishing something, but in reality, those things aren't moving anything. It's just making you as a person feel good. I think we're on polar ends of this because if you need those little wins to move forward and start creating momentum, that makes total sense to me. And I think that's something that should be celebrated. For me, there's times where I find that I feel like I did a lot that day, but there are things that you would never even notice. Or why? I know I spent a couple hours like fixing our email signature. Granted, it's a touch point. I want it to be polished. There's a reason why I did it. But in reality, I could have been calling prospects, reaching out to a client, working on client work. Like there's things that have been much more important to focus on, but it's the mindset. I want to make sure that for me that I'm focused on things that are not marginally moving the business, but are critical to what I'm trying to accomplish. And that it makes me think of this concept of the pickle jar. So the idea is that you have a pickle jar or glass jar, and if you fill it up with sand representing all the small tasks, then you try to put in the rock, the big task, and you can't fit it because you just put your capacity with these small things. But if you put in a couple big rocks, like the major priorities of the day, and you put in a bunch of small rocks, little small things, then you fill it with sand, then you fill it with water. Like if you focus on the critical pieces of the puzzle that you need to move whatever thing you're moving forward, you always have time for those little things in and out of it. For you, there's a different mindset of like, no, I need some of these little things to kind of move my body forward and to move my brain and build that internal momentum so that way I can focus on these big tasks.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Where's the pickle?
Well, okay, instead of a rock, we put a pickle in it.
No, I was like really waiting for the pickle. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're going to put sand and then you're going to put a pickle in it? So
I don't think anybody has like a rock jar, so you just say pickle jar. But
what?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
instead of rocks, you put a pickle in it.
I'm a visual person, so
sure.
that's why I don't know. Maybe there's something I don't.
No, that's a valid question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. That's also why I started doing theme days.
Okay.
So I noticed myself wasting so much energy and so much effort by switching the context. And like, I'm going to invoice this client and then I'm going to schedule a call with this client. I'm going to do taxes here. No, now I have dedicated days for specific things. Of course, it gets adjusted depending on the workflow, like how much work I have coming in. But Mondays, for example, unless I really have to, I try not to schedule any calls, any meetings, and any client work. That's my preparation for everything else. And that's for marketing. Tuesdays, client work, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But it helps me tremendously to make sure that I'm focusing on the right things within that bucket. But at the same time, like just the idea of doing something that scares me, overwhelms me, I don't want to do it. That's as the first thing. Like I cannot even imagine forcing myself to do it. And I think we're both very intrinsically motivated. I don't understand why people say, in order to overcome procrastination, give yourself a reward. I don't care because I'm going to give myself the reward anyway. Like it doesn't do anything for me, right? It's like Zuza said that I can have this pastry, or it's just,
I'm just going to have the pastry no matter what I do.
and it's just, it doesn't matter. It's not enough to motivate me at all. So that's why, like, thinking about having to overcome the resistance to something that is so overwhelming, I have to have that momentum. I have to have that push and something, the encouragement.
I think it's great. I mean, and honestly, for me personally, where I do find myself sometimes going like, I'm working on stuff that doesn't matter, I need to switch. I want to change my mindset of like, no, I'm building the momentum to do this next. You know, instead of it being a negative that I did these things, but no, look at all these things I did. So now I have some momentum and I move forward. So yeah, you know, it's different by individual and everybody's going to have a different perspective on it. But procrastination is one of those pieces that stops you from moving forward.
Yes. And last thing I want to say about procrastination, at least for now, is it is so funny that we wait for the right moment. So we think, oh, I'm not going to work on this because I have to feel a certain way. I have to feel motivated, or I have to feel like whatever. It's not going to happen. And you just have to stop waiting for it. Because it's not, you know what I mean? If people always waited for motivation to strike, nothing would ever happen. So it's just, it's learning how to move past your emotions, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
But like you said, do it scared. So how can you do it despite all these feelings and not focusing on getting rid of the feeling and then doing the thing?
Yeah, I don't know if we're qualified to give a bunch of ideas in terms of how to get over perfectionism and procrastination. We could talk about our experiences. And one of the things that I've done more from a personal accomplishment perspective than a business perspective is I create bullet charts. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a bullet chart is. So it's a bunch of little boxes that represent every day of the week or a week out of the month. And the idea is that, okay, I'm going to floss my teeth every day this month, let's say. So you fill in these boxes. So each day you do it, you fill in the boxes. And it's a visual way to represent how you're progressing. But the idea behind it, or at least the idea that I take away from it, is that even if I miss some days or I didn't accomplish what I did, look how much I did. And I think it's just flipping the mindset of, oh, I didn't accomplish it perfectly. You know, I didn't do this perfect, 30-day thing, but I did it for 25 days.
Sure.
Like, we individually have to change our mindset about what accomplishment means, what validation means, what progress and success mean. Because once you do that, then it doesn't have to be perfect anymore. But if you're just not doing it because you're scared or you're fearful of the result, those are some things that you can work with yourself to get over.
Yes. Well, it's two things. And one of them is the thing you were talking about is like a string, right? Of whatever boxes are. That works for me really well. I'm very motivated for 2 days. The third day, I don't give a shit. I'm just like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just boxes, right? So I'm weird as far as those things. And I'm actually really encouraged that other people know how to do this, and it actually is motivating them. But one thing to keep in mind about procrastination is the energy that we waste thinking about the things that we have to do. It's almost as if it's worrying about the things that are not there yet. You will worry about them when they happen because now you're worrying twice, right? And it's the same idea of it's bleeding our energy. It's depleting us because we're constantly thinking about it, but it's not solving anything.
Yeah.
And I'm very guilty of, I love planning. I love organizing. I don't necessarily care for the execution of these things, but someone said it's like active procrastination.
Planning is active procrastination.
Yes, exactly. And it is. And it's very joyful to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do all these things. But the execution is not necessarily there. But what I'm saying is, if I put the same amount of energy into actually doing it and not planning it, everything would have been done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of summarizing everything, both perfectionism and procrastination limit your ability to validate what you're trying to work on, whether that's a new business startup, whether that's a design, whether that's an update or a brand. You have to get something out and get validation on it. Perfect doesn't mean successful.
Yeah.
You could make something and you think it's perfect, but the idea may not resonate with your audience. The solution may have flaws in your thinking because you didn't get it in front of other people. So perfect is nothing. Perfect doesn't really exist. And in terms of probably more perfection than procrastination, but there's always more than one solution. It's not a one thing that has to be just this way. If I get this thing just right, then it's going to be successful. It's just not true, because I might have a totally different implementation or a different idea that would be just or more successful than what you're working on.
It's difficult because it's like crossing a bridge and it's foggy and you can't see the other side. And I want to see the other side. I want to see exactly where I'm going. I want to know what's going to happen when I get there. And I want to have a clear image of it. And then unfortunately is not always the case. But that's the thing. It's a matter of trusting the process.
Trusting in yourself.
Yes. And that's not a given,
Yeah.
right? It's not obvious for a lot of people, but it's understanding that you will not find out what's on the other side of the bridge if you don't move despite the fog. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I think creatives and business owners, just do it. Just go out and do it.
Just do it.
Just try it.
Absolutely.
Failure's dumb. You didn't fail. You just learned.
Yeah,
Move forward, test an idea out. Don't feel failure. Just keep going.
absolutely. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, your brand story is yours to define.
Follow us at Co-Branded for more tips and strategies. Stay curious, stay creative, and we'll catch you next time.